Hello, everyone. Welcome to my live demo and Q&A on all things modeling chocolate. So I have Dave here, and he is going to help me out, kind of communicating with you guys and with me, so that I can answer some of your questions during this live stream, because I can't read and work at the same time. So if you hear a random man, that would be my husband, Dave. All right, so I'm super excited about this one. A lot of you ask me about modeling chocolate since I cover pretty much all my cakes in modeling chocolate. And there's a lot of questions, and it's really hard to get it all out in text, especially like in the comments on the YouTube videos, things like that. So this is great. This is a great way to just have like one video where I talk about everything modeling chocolate, and I can answer any of your questions. So very excited. Yeah. While I've got you and while people start filtering in, I wanted to let you guys know about a few things that I've got coming up. So I officially am allowed to tell you that I'm going to be on an episode of Duff Takes the Cake. So if you haven't seen Duff Takes the Cake, it is on Food Network. It is a show about Duff Goldman, Ace Cakes, and I'm on an episode June 15th, which is a Monday, and you guys should check that out. We make this really cool whale cake, and it's like cut through the center with like a water line. It's really, really cool. So I'm proud of that cake, and the team is really fun. It's gonna be a fun show. So you guys should check that out. Also, thank you, Andrew. Also, I wanted to let you know that we're doing a giveaway on our next live video. So it's a good one, you guys. So the giveaway is for a $100 gift certificate to the Satin Ice Shop, where you can get yourself some modeling chocolate. Here's the tub. Hang on, let me move some of there's the tub. So this is the modeling chocolate. It's called Choco Pan. And so you'll have one of you will be chosen. We'll get more details later. But on our next live stream, we're gonna give away $100, and it's gonna be Choco Pan, or you could even get Fondant if you want. But it's gonna be, yeah, Choco Pan modeling chocolate you can purchase there. So that's pretty cool. And this is the stuff I use. So,
Let me ask if you make your own.
You know what? So that's a good question. People do ask, they're like, are you using homemade? Are you using a brand? So if I am to purchase a brand, I'm gonna purchase Choco Pan. Choco Pan is a little bit softer in consistency than other brands, and I actually prefer that. There's definitely different, you can like try out different brands, and they're all a little different. And some people like when it's a little more firm. I like when it's a little bit softer because I can work with it right away. It doesn't like hurt my hands to knead it. So that's why I use Choco Pan. I really like it, and the flavor's good. It's made with real chocolate, good stuff. But I also do make my own, and I recommend making your own if you're going to try out modeling chocolate for the first time. You know, it's like, let's try it out. You can just really easily make it, and then you can see how that is, and if you like it and all that. Sometimes I make my own in large batches, but the thing is, this is time. So it takes a lot of time to get right. And when you're making large amounts, because you're covering or making cakes every day, or you need to cover a huge cake, I recommend buying it, because your time, I think, is more valuable than the amount of time it takes to make this stuff. But you can make it yourself, absolutely, and I love making it myself, and we have a tutorial showing you how to make it, and Dave's gonna put that below, so you guys can check that out. We'll put a link below.
It's in the chat too.
Okay, it's in the chat too, so you guys can, you know, make it yourself. I like making it myself. What's really fun about making it yourself is you can mess with the amount of corn syrup and chocolate. So if you add more corn syrup, you're gonna have a softer chocolate, and if you add a little less corn syrup, you're gonna have a more firm chocolate, and everybody's a little different in what they like. So that's a great way to be able to like mess with your chocolate, try something new. I honestly, there's no right or wrong way to use modeling chocolate. It's kind of like, what do you prefer? Some people get hot hands, I know. They have warm hands, and the really soft chocolates, sometimes they have a hard time with. So
if you do your own, can you add flavor?
you can definitely add flavor to the modeling chocolate if you make it yourself, for sure. We could probably go into that another time. This live is going to be a bit about like how to use it, but also like ask questions right now. I would love to answer them while I'm live, but if you watch this and the stream is over, ask all the questions you'd like in the comments, because I will try to keep up with that and answer all your questions, because I feel like I've been using modeling chocolate on my cakes probably for about eight years to cover my cakes almost exclusively. Like, I really don't use fondant too often. I use it sometimes, and I'll kind of explain when I use it, but I typically always use modeling chocolate. So I have a lot of answers. I got a lot to talk about with modeling chocolate, so ask away. So, let me get that out of the way. All right. So if you guys aren't subscribed to my channel and you like what you're hearing and you like our videos, please subscribe and please like this video, and because that really helps us out. The more that you guys click the little like button, the more people will see it, and the more driven I become to keep making good videos for you. But we put out new videos every Monday, and we like to do live streams we try to get one out a week, where we can just answer questions. Sometimes we're just shooting the breeze, and sometimes we go over something specific like modeling chocolate. So I'm going to keep this video up for sure. I know a lot of you ask, are you going to keep it up? I'm definitely keeping it up so that you guys can come back, reference it. And again, I'll keep up with the comments if you have any questions. So I did want to take this opportunity to announce the winner of our drawing for our patrons. So if you guys aren't patrons, you can become a patron at patreon.com/sideserfcakes. Patreon is a cool way for us to connect, and I do fun little, like this one, this drawing is to have you guys draw these really quick sketches within 40 seconds, and then I turn that cake sketch into an actual cake for one of my videos on YouTube on a Monday. So it's gonna be really fun to interpret your sketch, and your sketches are very quick. They're adorable and hilarious, and I love all of the sketches that you guys sent. They're just so great. So I'm excited to see who wins. But yeah, if you guys wanna be entered in these kind of drawings, you can do that at patreon.com/sideserfcakes. So I'm gonna have Dave pick at random. Everybody's entered by now. He's gonna pick at random. I like to keep it random, keep it fair. And we're going to announce the winner right now.
Drum roll, drum roll, drum roll. The winner is Cheryl Ridenour.
Cheryl Ridenour. Woohoo! Cheryl. Cheryl won. I'm excited to check out her sketch, see which one it is. And I'm really excited about this cake. So I will talk more about that when the cake comes, but making one of your sketches into a cake is just gonna be so fun. We'll see how I interpret your drawings. All right. So the first thing I wanna do is let's get into it. I wanted to talk to you guys about modeling chocolate and fondant and what basically the differences are. So here I have a little bit of modeling chocolate right out of the bucket, and you can see that it's pretty firm. It's looking a little, I don't know, maybe a little bit, needs a little bit of work. We want this to be something we can mold. So what you do every time you take your modeling chocolate out of the bucket is you want to knead it. It's very similar to fondant in that way. You want to knead your fondant before you start working with it. So if you're wondering why you have a very hard mass in a bucket and what you're supposed to do, you gotta start by kneading it. Now, if it's too hard, you can put it in the microwave. So I put it in the microwave for no longer than about 5 seconds at a time. Then you take it out and you kind of knead it and see if it's soft enough to knead. This one's pretty good. It really depends on the temperature of your room. So if you're in a warm room, your chocolate's gonna be real soft, and if you're in a cold room, it's obviously gonna be a bit more firm. Temperature is really key when you're working with modeling chocolate. So, see how nice that is now? Beauty. So the difference between modeling chocolate and fondant is that fondant I always think of as more like, it's like a one solid sheet. You're gonna cover your cake in one solid sheet and you're gonna work it around the edges. And when you go in and you sculpt with fondant, it can be a little bit tricky because it's hard to hide seams. So when I say that, it means if I have, here's my cake, here's my layer, let's flatten this out a bit. So here's my layer, in this case it's modeling chocolate, my layer of modeling chocolate on the cake, and I wanna add something, which I do all the time. It's pretty easy for me to blend it. I'm even using my finger. You can see that that line, it's called a seam, it disappears really easily with modeling chocolate. So it's very similar to clay. Now, if you're using fondant, fondant's a little bit different. You can't get quite as detailed. It doesn't keep its shape quite as well. It's a little bit more like a marshmallow. So it's just a very different material to use. It's funny because most people assume that my cakes are covered in fondant, but they aren't. I would say like, I honestly think it's like 99% of my cakes are modeling chocolate. And then when I do cover a cake in fondant, I regret it immediately, only because I'm so used to modeling chocolate that I like have this, I have a moment where I'm like, I forgot I'm using a different material. They're different. They're definitely different. Modeling chocolate, if you're wondering what it tastes like whatever chocolate you use to make it. So this is white chocolate, and there's so many different brands, and the recipes, when you go to make it, if you want to use different brands, you're going to have to figure out the perfect recipe for that particular chocolate, because the chocolates all have different amounts of ingredients in them. They're not just like they're not all the same. So with modeling chocolate, you can also do it with regular chocolate, like milk chocolate, rather than white chocolate. Obviously, I'm using white chocolate because I can go in and add color. So with modeling chocolate, because you added corn syrup, you are able to use water-based food color to color it. So I am able to use gel food color. Let me grab one. Oh, they're all green. Okay, so I use these a lot. It's worn down. This is a Americolor, which is what I usually use to color. You just add a drop into the chocolate, you knead it in. Now, when you're coloring chocolate, you think, you're crazy. You have to use oil-based food color because chocolate is oil-based. So if you were to color just the white chocolate, like on its own, not modeling chocolate, you would need to use special food color that is, that you have like special food color that's oil-based. Otherwise, it'll seize up. But we're using modeling chocolate. Modeling chocolate, you can use water-based food color, like this gel food color. It's great. How wonderful is that? Guys, that's mostly what I have, so that makes me happy. What else? When I make it, I will use like, I try out different brands. I mean, it depends on what flavor you like. So mess with the brands. Some people like different flavors and kinds of chocolate, so. All right, so I'm gonna move this away. Oh, here's a little piece of fondant I wanted to show you. So with modeling chocolate, I can leave this out for a decent amount of time here in Texas. It depends on the humidity of where you are, but I can leave it out for a while, re-knead it, and it's okay. So when I'm working with it, sometimes I set it aside. Ideally, you would keep it covered in like plastic wrap to keep it as soft as possible, but I'm a little bit lenient with the modeling chocolate. When it comes to fondant, you always have to keep it wrapped. And that's because like this has been sitting out for not very long, and you can see like the inside is still soft, but the outside gets that hard shell. So this is fondant. So they call this elephant skin in the biz. It does look kind of legit. It looks pretty cool, actually. But only if you want that effect. Now, modeling chocolate, it's really not going to do that. It might do it after like a full 24 hours, but for the most part, it's not going to do this cracking like fondant does.
Do you have a take on buttercream fondant? Are you familiar with buttercream fondant?
I don't know. I don't think so. Buttercream fondant?
That was a question from Dan.
I'll have to look that up. I would, if buttercream fondant maybe is a little bit, I wonder if the texture is a little different.
Soreza said that she uses your modeling chocolate recipe, but she can't find commercial where she lives, but she can't roll it because it sticks and breaks. So do you have any suggestions for fixing it?
So I bet if the modeling chocolate, is if you're having a hard time rolling it out, that is likely because you haven't kneaded it enough. So you do, like if I just took this and it had been sitting out and I just try to roll it out, it's not gonna happen. What you need to do is make sure that you have a nice kneaded chocolate so that it stays together. It shouldn't break or crack or anything like that. Remove that real quick. So I'm pretty sure that would be the reason that it wouldn't work. That, or when you make the modeling chocolate and it's firmed up, it's gonna be like really hard. You need to go ahead and knead it again and incorporate it until it is like this. So I know that if it's just at room temperature, you're gonna be like, wow, this is really hard. It's like, well, then you gotta put it in the microwave for just a little, 5 seconds, and then you can go ahead and knead it, and it's gonna be more like this stuff.
Gary asked about food coloring and the modeling chocolate coloring your hands, and is it better to use gloves?
100%. So in this demo, I'm not using gloves, but I do recommend using gloves. In fact, when you're trying to smooth out your modeling chocolate, if you don't have gloves on, it can get like, it's too sticky. So I use my tools only. But if you have a glove on, you can like actually go in and like smooth things out with your hands. So I do recommend using gloves typically. I need to get to the store and get some more gloves.
And it doesn't stain your hands with food color?
Yes, and it definitely will keep your hands from getting messy with the food color, for sure. For sure. Sometimes I get a little impatient, and that might be why I don't use gloves, but I really do, when I'm taking my time with it, I do use gloves, I promise. So here's fondant again. I wanted to show you real quickly while I kind of stretch it out. You can see how far it stretches. Now, if I do that with modeling chocolate, this is kind of helpful with like the texture. This is pretty kneaded, but like it breaks a little bit quicker. It's a little bit, how do I describe it? It's a little bit more, maybe like a Tootsie Roll, and this is more like a big marshmallow. So if that's kind of helpful, marshmallowy with the fondant, Tootsie Roll-ish for the modeling chocolate. Okay, so I'm gonna roll this out. The first thing I'm gonna do when you're rolling out modeling chocolates is you wanna have a nonstick mat or at least parchment paper. Parchment kind of slips a little, so ideally you'd have a nonstick mat, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. And this is cornstarch. So cornstarch I like to put down because that's gonna help. This is really soft and sticky, and this is going to keep the modeling chocolate from sticking to pretty much everything, because it can get sticky, especially when you just kneaded it. Kneaded it. Is that even a word, kneaded it?
Kneading with a K.
Yeah.
Kelsey Mowry has a good question. She asks, when you're trying to get your modeling chocolate to be colored black, do you use dark chocolate to help color it, or do you just dye the white modeling chocolate?
You know what, that is a great question. So when you're trying to create like a black modeling chocolate, I would definitely recommend making a modeling chocolate with a brown chocolate. That way you can add just a little bit of black and it will get pretty dark. Now, if you're trying to turn like white modeling chocolate black, it's gonna be a lot of food color. And if you put that much food color in it, it might change the consistency of the chocolate.
And the flavor.
Yeah, and the flavor. You don't want that much food color. So definitely starting with a brown is much better than starting with a white. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but they also, Chocopan sells them in all different colors. They have ivory, white, red, black. They have all kinds of colors. So if you were to purchase some, that's kind of nice to have at least a small pail of the black on hand, because coloring it that dark, it can be a little bit annoying. So here I have the green. This is going to be the base color for, as you can see, making a jalapeno. So I'm going to roll out this green. I could start with white, but I started with the lightest color on the pepper, which I see there's this kind of light green in the stem, and like certain areas are a little bit lighter than some of these darker areas. So I found a really light green, and I'm gonna start with that. So I put some cornstarch on the rolling pin, and I put some on the modeling chocolate, and I'm gonna roll it out. Ooh. So when you roll it out, I like to start with the edges. So I go in and I kind of work it out This is a lot of chocolate. I don't really need this much, but I'll show you anyway. So I'm rolling out the edges. It's a little different than fondant. It's a little more forgiving. So I like to make kind of like an egg. So this is a bit domed in the middle. Let me move this a little bit down. There we go. So this is a bit of like a dome in the middle, and then I have all the outside edges are flat. And that way I can keep my round shape, and then I can go in and smash it down and kind of figure out where I want to add a little bit more length, some more chocolate. Alright, so...
Voodoo Doll asks what the best way for detailing a modeling chocolate is.
Detailing as in
I
when...
assume like sculpting details? Like
Real fine details?
That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I am going to actually go over that in a little bit. So as far as fine details, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I will definitely talk about that once this cake is covered.
What about storing modeling chocolate?
So all you need to do is make sure that your modeling chocolate is wrapped really well to store it. So you don't want any air touching. It's very similar to fondant in that way. And it lasts quite a while. The ones that you buy, they have expiration dates on them, which is nice. So you know exactly how long it'll last. I would say homemade's gonna last, like, to be safe, I'm gonna say 6 months, but I honestly think you could probably keep it for about a year. Because really, it's just chocolate. It's like almost, it is a lot of chocolate and a tiny bit of corn syrup, so.
Jessica's hoping that you're gonna be able to make it back to New Jersey or New York for a class sometime soon.
Yes, I want to visit. I'm ready to start visiting people again. I do want to visit New York and of course New Jersey. I had a lot of fun when we were filming Buddy vs. Duff. I was in New Jersey, and that was my first time, and it was really fun. We were going back and forth from New York to New Jersey. And
that one time. Don't you remember?
oh yeah, we did. We drove through New Jersey many years ago, and we went to a Hooters and we got a t-shirt in Wayne, New Jersey, from Ohio. So we were driving from Ohio at that time. We used to live there. All right, so now I got my piece of modeling chocolate. I'm gonna bring over my already carved pepper, jalapeno. So this is gonna be a little larger than life size, clearly, but I wanted to do something a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. Now I'm gonna place this chocolate right over top, like that. Now the key to covering your cake in modeling chocolate is the temperature of your chocolate. If you rolled out your modeling chocolate and you picked it up and it doesn't keep its shape, it completely folds on you and it's just a mess, that means it is far too warm. So you gotta take that modeling chocolate, either let it get back to room temperature by not touching it. When you need it, it gets warm. So you either need to let it sit at room temperature. It's gonna take a little time, or you can put it in the fridge at this point, and I mean, maybe 20 seconds or so. And after 20 seconds or so, it'll firm up. You'll be able to pick it up and you'll be able to move it. So that's key. Now, if I were to cover something that doesn't have, it's not sculpted, say it was to the side of like a square cake, I would take that sheet, I'd roll it out, I would literally pick up this whole mat, put it in my fridge, I'd put it in for about a minute, and then you take it back out and it is like really firm, so you can just pick it up and place it onto your cake. So the temperature of your chocolate is going to be different depending on what you're covering. So in this case, this is a room temperature cake. I'm keeping the cake room temperature because I want this chocolate to stay soft. Now, if this cake under here was chilled, then once I put that chocolate on there, it's gonna firm up. So the chocolate will take to the temperature of the cake. So I really typically like to cover my cakes while they're at room temperature, if I can. And then if it's something nice and clean, like I said, like a square shaped cake, then I can chill it and then even chill my chocolate. So it's always gonna be a little different. There's no it really depends on what you're working on. But in this case, I've got room temperature cake and room temperature modeling chocolate.
Can you airbrush modeling chocolate with water-based colors?
You can absolutely airbrush modeling chocolate. You do want to The thing with that is you don't want to get too close because the food color, if it's water based, it will bead up. So what you want to do with airbrushing is you want to do a nice distant color, and then you let it dry, and then you go back in with the next layer, let it dry, and then another layer. So it's just, if you get too close, really with painting with an airbrush, that's going to happen. If you get too close, it will bead up, but especially with modeling chocolate.
There wouldn't be any issue with rolling modeling chocolate out with a wooden rolling pin, would there?
No, if you have a wooden rolling pin, that's perfectly fine. You just want to make sure you've got cornstarch on it, just because it might get a little sticky. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of work it into the shape. I keep my cakes very simple. I add all my details in the modeling chocolate. So this is just the basic shape of the pepper, and then I go in and I add little itty bitty details. I don't get too crazy with the actual sculpting of the cake itself because it just needs to be a simple shape. If you try too hard to get in there with little details, it's a waste of time because we do so much more with the modeling chocolate. So I'm gonna actually take the ends and I'm gonna pinch them. This is also not how I would cover this cake if I was using fondant. So if I were to use fondant, I would try to work it around and get it covered in a nice clean shape. With modeling chocolate, you can do things like pinch here, and I'm gonna trim it away. I'll be right back. Grab my tools.
How thick do you typically roll out your modeling chocolate?
Good question. So as far as thickness, it changes. It depends on what I'm working on. In this one, you don't need to go much thicker than this. Now, if the cake is really small, so I think I made these little blueberries, I would still keep it about this thick. This would be the thinnest I'd go because when you go to sculpt it, you'll poke through to the cake. So you try to go about that thickness. I wish I knew exactly what size it was, but you can also make it just slightly thicker, and if it is a little thicker, then it's gonna be just a little easier to work with. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you want to make it a little thicker, that's fine. So let me trim this away. So I pinched this, and I know that it's chocolate to chocolate. And then I go in with a blade, and I'm gonna trim, and I might as well just go around and trim the whole thing.
What are ways to get around the modeling chocolate getting too hot and getting too soft?
So if your modeling chocolate is too soft, I think that a lot of cases it's because sometimes you can't help it because you might be in a humid area, so it does like gather moisture, but really the temperature of the room I mess with. So if my modeling chocolate's too soft and then I get all frustrated, that means whoa, take a break and cool down the room. That actually happened on Buddy versus Duff. Our air conditioning went out and we were working on a putt-putt cake, and I was having the hardest time trying to like work with this super soft chocolate. It was 80 something degrees in there. So in here I think we have it at about like 74. And that's what I like working at. But you can always adjust it. So what I'm literally going to do with this cake is, what you can do is, I cracked my board. What you can do is you can trim this away and tuck it under, but sometimes at this size, I actually do like to pick it up. So let's see, yeah. So I like to pick it up and work it around the bottom. Now, if you had a big cake, obviously you're not gonna be able to do this. This would be, you're gonna pick it up with your hands, but because it's tiny, I know I can get away with it. And
She's taking the class in August, and she ordered us a modeling chocolate to get familiar with it.
That's awesome! I'm so excited you're gonna be in the class. Baby Yoda. I'm super excited for that class. Oh, I'm glad you're gonna be a little bit more familiar with it. That's definitely gonna be helpful. Let's see. I'm gonna trim this away. Boop. Now that I trim that away, again, wouldn't do this with fondant. Modeling chocolate I can. So to hide this seam, all you do is use the side of a sculpting tool. I'll use something that's like this one or this one. Wow, I didn't realize how similar those are. But I want to take the side. What I do is I press down and I roll. I press down and I roll. Now, if I was working with this and this sat out for a while, it got completely to room temperature and it's a little bit hard to blend these seams, you can literally get a blow dryer, put it on like a low setting, put it right up against there and kind of blow dry it for a second, and it'll soften the chocolate to where you can blend it again. So modeling chocolate, when it's firm, it's gonna be a little difficult to blend, but when it's soft, it's very easy.
Is modeling chocolate something you could just eat?
Yes, modeling chocolate is almost all white chocolate, so you could definitely eat it as is.
So yeah, also repeat the question that I'm asking because I can't hear me.
Oh, is modeling chocolate something that you can just like eat, like regular? It's just like fondant in that way. You would just take bites out of it, you cut it up. It just has a different flavor than fondant. I forgot you guys can't really hear Dave very well. Sorry about that.
So repeat the questions.
Sorry.
Kelsey said that the Yoda cake on Buddy vs. Duff was incredible. You should show your baby Yoda.
I should show my baby Yoda. You said you liked my Buddy vs. Duff Yoda cake. You know what's funny? That cake ended up going to Duff's niece. So actually, Duff's brother wanted it. He's a huge Star Wars fan. So he actually kept it. So it's still in his house, which is awesome. And his niece was playing with it. I'll show you guys baby Yoda.
That's what the class is for.
Yes. Let's see if it'll... Woo, baby Yoda. So baby Yoda, this is the example cake that I'm gonna bring to class. I like to have an example. So he's just like this cute guy. He's got gelatin eyes. We're gonna go over all in class. I have this class. If you guys wanna sign up and you're in Austin, it's at sideserfcakes.com. But we're gonna do the whole body. We're gonna add these little hands, add some texture, and then he's got this whole cute little face thing going on. So we're really gonna focus on this adorableness right here. Because, come on, baby Yoda, adorable. Bye, baby Yoda. So that's gonna be a really fun class. All right. And let's bring the pepper over. So I like to have my little live model. Let me move this down. There we go. So I have my little mini model. I'm gonna trim some of this away. So this is actually, I didn't plan on this, but I think I need this to taper a little more, so I'm actually gonna cut this off. And this little chunk right here is actually a little bit of modeling chocolate. I think the cake starts about here. But I'm fine with that. Sometimes that happens. You're not like perfect and you gotta kind of run with it. It wasn't perfect, never perfect.
Do you ever cover non-sculpted cakes with modeling chocolate? So like a regular tiered cake?
I do cover my regular non-sculpted cakes in modeling chocolate. I actually, even though it's a sculpted cake, we have a cake coming up that's like a bag. So it's pretty much a really clean square cake. And I covered that one in modeling chocolate. And the reason that I do that is because fondant at room temperature stays pretty soft. Like how I was showing you this, the inside's always gonna be just like a little bit soft. Where modeling chocolate, when it's at room temperature, it's much more firm and it's durable. So I can trust that it won't start to sag. I've had experiences where my fondant would start, I'd put it up, I'd smooth it out, and then like I walk away, it's a little too warm in the room and the modeling chocolate will start to sag. And it's like, heartbreaking. So I prefer to cover even my round cakes and squared cakes and cleaner tiered cakes in modeling chocolate. Plus, when you start using something for so long, you get used to using it, but also like I have customers who order cakes and they get used to that flavor. So I don't like to switch it up on them. I like to just stick with one thing so they know what they're getting. It's got a little nub. And see, like this kind of dipped in, and I'm not even mad about that. Sometimes things happen and I run with it. I kind of like it because I know that a pepper's gonna have imperfections, so I don't get too worried about things like this. When that happens, I actually kind of like those little mistakes. I mean, it's when you're making a food cake, you can make it perfect, and that is cool, or you can make it, have little imperfections, which I think makes it look more realistic. So it just depends on the effect you're going for.
When doing classes, have you ever had any students with no artistic talent at all?
When doing classes, have I ever had students with no artistic talent at all? I would say no, because by the end of the class, they end up with a cake that looks amazing. And so obviously there's some talent happening. So they might not know it. I've had students come in who are like, I don't do art. I've never made a cake. I just saw you on Nailed It and I thought that it'd be fun to take this class. And it's like, awesome. I'm like, I can't wait to see your cake. And then by the end of it, I take them through it step by step. So they definitely have a very amazing completed cake. And I swear, some people get really emotional and they even like cry. They get so excited. You know, I get a lot of good criers. Like I get people who cry in class sometimes. I get people when I deliver a cake who cry sometimes. I've had people who watched the episode of Buddy versus Duff, and some people have reached out and said that my Yoda cake made them cry. And I was like, oh my God, that makes my heart so, it's melting. It's like the nicest, most biggest compliment ever when somebody gets so emotional that they actually start to tear up. Now, I have to give credit to the makers of whoever made Yoda. I don't know exactly who it is, but whoever came up with those characters obviously deserves 99% of the credit, but I'm glad that I was able to recreate something that still, you know, made them feel a little emotional. Now, I went off a little bit. Let me move on real quick. Okay. So, what do we have? I want to talk to you guys about how to paint modeling chocolate. I think that is also one of those questions where it's like everybody is curious how this works. So, I'm gonna roll some out. Okay, I'm gonna roll out my modeling chocolate. I'm actually gonna roll some fondant out too. Oh, you know what? No. I want to show you the difference between painting with painting on modeling chocolate versus fondant. Pro tip, if you want to cut this yellow hue, if you add the tiniest amount of purple to it, because it's got a little bit of a yellow ivory color, if you add a little bit of purple, it's going to muddy it a bit and make it more of a true white color. That's like a fun thing, because purple and yellow are complementary colors, so that's why that happens. That's another that's another topic. All right. I'm gonna bring this down a little.
Kelsey Morrow said that she's getting ready to make her own sculpted cake with modeling chocolate. So this is a helpful video.
That was Kelsey?
Yes.
Kelsey's going to make her own sculpted cake covered in modeling chocolate. I am so happy to hear that. And Kelsey, if you have any questions, I will try my best to answer. So if while you're working on it something gets a little weird, just let me know. And actually in the comments of this video, I'll check it and I'll try to answer those questions. That's exciting though. I'm glad you're using it.
So May asked how to get the modeling chocolate bright white, but I think you just explained that, right? It's using the purple.
Yeah, so they have, you're not going to be able to get modeling chocolate quite as white as fondant. Now, fondant is going to be this bright white because it's mostly sugar, and the sugar allows it to be white, where this is white chocolate, and white chocolate is never truly a pure white. It's always going to have that slightly off color. So if you want this to be more of a white rather than an ivory, they have bright white, Chocopan does, and it is very white. It's still just slightly less white than maybe a fondant, but it is still pretty white, and you can add a tiny, when I say tiny, I mean really tiny amount of purple gel food color to the chocolate, knead it in, and it'll make it more of a gray, and that gray effect looks more white. And that sounds a little weird, but okay, so I'm gonna get some food color on here, and I'm gonna do kind of like color swatches so you guys can see specifically what's going on here. So, actually, let me start with water. All right, so here I have some water, got a brush, and some green. So I want to show you how these two things will look with me using water, get it in there, water and food color. So use a little more gel. Okay, so that is on fondant. And that is on modeling chocolate. So this is, again, water and gel food color on fondant versus modeling chocolate. Now, the reason it does this is because modeling chocolate is chocolate and chocolate is oil-based. And this food color is actually a water-based food color. So it's going to bead up. Now, fondant's a lot easier to paint on for that reason. So that's a perk of fondant. I still think that the details that you can add with modeling chocolate is worth the painting, the difficulty in painting, because there's a lot more you can do with modeling chocolate in terms of adding pieces and blending things, where fondant doesn't like to blend very easily. If you take two pieces of fondant, you put them together, it's just really hard to hide seams. So again though, I still think it's worth it. And as this starts to evaporate, the water, I can go in and smooth it out. You can see it's just a little better. And then even more as I go in later, it'll start to evaporate. This is water and gel, and it will start to smooth out. So you can go in and paint with it. Now it's not gonna be quite as beautifully pretty as as painting on fondant, but it's still, I do it all the time and people really like it. So I promise you, nobody would notice that it's not quite as smooth, but because really it works. Like, that looks nice. Now at first though, I feel like people, when they use water and gel food color on modeling chocolate, they're like, whoa, like that's a big mess. How am I gonna paint anything like that? So you just gotta give it a minute, let it evaporate. The water needs to just dry out a little, and then you can go in and smooth it. But then once it's dry, then you gotta kind of add more layers. Once it's dry, it's a little bit hard to go back. So the other way to paint your modeling chocolates, this is, here it is. So here I have some, woohoo, 190 proof. This is like some alcohol. This is some major stuff. I usually use, what is it called? Everclear. I usually use Everclear. This was another brand that's pretty much the same thing. So this is 190 proof. It's clear. I'm gonna put some in a little cup, and I'm going to go over why this is another option. You don't need a lot. So to dilute your food color with alcohol, I can use gel food color, a little bit of that alcohol, and then when I paint, see how it didn't bead up the same way it did with water? It already went on nice and smooth. So you can also, instead of using a strong alcohol, you can also use like an extract. If you were like, oh, I have a lemon extract, it has so much alcohol in it, it's kind of the same thing. And I know some people might be weird about the alcohol. I promise you, it evaporates immediately, just like that water did. This alcohol is so strong, like even in the cup, I bet this would disappear in like a few hours. It evaporates really quickly. It doesn't leave any flavor on your chocolate. But I know that, you know, maybe you don't have that or you don't want to use it. That's why I wanted to show you that water still will work if you give it a second to evaporate. But I typically will like to use the strong alcohol, the 190 proof, because it's just gonna make my life easier. Like, it works right away. I don't have to wait for it to evaporate or anything. So that's nice and smooth. It looks pretty close to this. And it's like this part, still a little wet, but it'll evaporate very quickly, I promise. Another thing I wanted to mention, you can see that these colors are kind of translucent. So that means that you can see the color underneath. It's not like opaque. You can see the brush strokes. You can see that white underneath. So a fun tip is if you add some white to it, it's gonna look more opaque. And it really depends on what you're doing. So if you want a nice solid green, you add a little bit of white to the green. And then a little bit of that alcohol. And I'll paint right in the middle. Hang on, let me get more.
It's your world.
It is. It's your world. Okay, so see how much more opaque that is? It still has a slight, still a slightly transparent, but that is definitely going to be a lot more of a solid color than these other ones next to it. The other ones are more translucent, and just by adding a little bit of white, you're getting a more opaque color. So then you can go in and you can mess with it. Like if you want a nice solid, you know, no transparency, just a nice solid color, add a little bit of white to your gel food color. Now if you want that translucent look, that's more like a watercolor, which I really like. I like to add up colors because as this starts to dry, I'll add more colors to it. That's another option. So that's 2 ways of painting, you know, with the same stuff. 2 ways of painting with gel food color and either 190 proof alcohol, your strongest stuff. I know some countries or some states can't get that strong, and if you can't get that strong of an alcohol, you can still get the strongest you can find. I know 80 proof still works too, so maybe not quite as well, but it does work better than just water.
How come you use a paintbrush all the time and not an airbrush?
So the reason that I use a paintbrush rather than an airbrush is it's a few reasons. Mostly because when I was in art school, my concentration was painting. So I'm very, very comfortable using a paintbrush and painting and adding highlights and shadows. So I'm just super comfortable with it. Like I know what I can do with it. I've got it down. Airbrush is a bit trickier. That doesn't mean I don't love using it. If I'm making a big giant cake, you better believe I'm going to use an airbrush rather than going in and painting like a 5-foot cake with just, you know, one of these. That would be a bummer. The other reason that I like to hand paint is because when I'm teaching, not everybody has an airbrush. And I know that that's kind of, you know, if you don't have an airbrush, it's you got to get one. It's kind of a pain. So I like to be able to hand paint and show you guys how I hand paint. The third reason is because airbrush gets in the air. So the food color will, this is funny, when you airbrush, and say I'm using green airbrush and I airbrush a cake and I spend an hour working on it, and then I go to the bathroom and I blow my nose and my boogers are green. So whatever color, and not just because they're green, but because the airbrush is in the air, so it gets all up in your nose. So you might have pink, you might blow your nose, you get some pink or some red. It can be terrifying. So the airbrush is all over the air. So not only are you breathing it in, but it can settle on things. So
I had a nosebleed a couple times once.
Dave said he thought he had a nosebleed, but it was just me airbrushing with red. So that's another thing. It's like, well, I'm letting that, you know, all that color in the air, it's settling on things. So when you go to like dust, if you're dusting off a table, the whole table's gonna have just like that very subtle green. You won't see it, but when you wipe it down, you can see it. And so basically, unless you have a very well ventilated area, it's kind of a bummer to have a green everywhere. I learned that the hard way. I was making a peacock cake once, and I was using green, and the green just was on everything. I had to clean the tops of all of our cabinets and the refrigerator, and I did not realize.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, everything was green. We mopped the floor, it was green. It was crazy. So that's another reason. I do love airbrushing though. Don't get me wrong. I love it, but it is it's a little messy. Oh man. All right, so I showed you guys how to paint and I showed you how to cover a cake. Again, quick recap, roll out the modeling chocolate. The temperature of the modeling chocolate is very important depending on what cake you're covering. If it's sculpted, keep it at room temperature. If it's a nice clean cake tier, go ahead and refrigerate that chocolate. Actually, I'll give this like a few seconds in the fridge. I want to show you how firm it gets. So right now it's like, so I'm gonna put it in the fridge real quick. Okay, so while we wait for that, does anybody have any other questions? I feel like I covered quite a bit.
Gary asked if you ever paint on canvas instead of cake. Yeah.
Gary, I do. I used to paint on canvas all the time, and now it's been a while, let's say. But I still have some really old paintings from like my college days, and I do miss painting, you know, with actual acrylic and oil paints and stuff. But I've been so into cake for so long now that, you know, I just can't find the time. But I should make time. I should mention this. So the reason that I use gel food color is because I like using it. I'm comfortable with it. I've used it since the beginning. I've tried out other paints, and there are paints that are specifically made for painting on chocolate. So they already have alcohol in them, and those are amazing. They're all a little different. Some of them that I've used are a little bit more transparent, so you gotta layer up the color and let it dry. Some of them take a little longer to dry. You can really go out and purchase some of those and check them out. The other thing that I like about using these is it's more cost effective. I make a ridiculous amount of cakes, and this is going to be, the color is so saturated in here, and it comes in these big bottles that you get a lot for your money. The other ones are a little bit more pricey because you're getting something that is specifically made for a specific purpose. So while they're amazing, I would go through those bottles so quickly that I really like using gel food color.
Are you gonna paint the pepper?
I'm gonna work on, I still have to go in with the pepper, and I need to add details and stuff. So I'm going to, I'll post that once I get that pepper going, but I'm not gonna do it on this live stream because it doesn't have any details yet. And I feel like this live stream would be about like eight hours long if I did that. But I am gonna hold off on that. Any other questions?
Can you use liposoluble food colorants instead of gel colorants?
Liposolvent?
I assume that means fat soluble.
You know, I would say that some people use cocoa butter, which is a very fatty option. And I think it paints beautifully on chocolate. So there are a lot of options, but I can't get too far into those because that's not what I typically use. But I should look into it because I know there's a lot of ways to paint now that making cakes is more popular than ever.
They said that they have time to see you finish the jalapeno.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep going a little bit longer at least. I did want to let you guys know real quick, when you cover a cake in modeling chocolate, you can refrigerate it. So say I covered that cake and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna work on this tomorrow. So I'm gonna refrigerate the cake, take it out, make sure it gets back to room temperature before I hand paint it. So the reason that you do that is because when you paint a cold cake like this on modeling chocolate, it's just gonna beat up and get really gooey. The modeling chocolate does not like to be cold. So typically when I make a cake covered in modeling chocolate, I will leave it at room temperature. And it really, since it firms up nicely at room temperature, it's gonna keep its shape. You can like knock on it, it gets nice and hard. So I like to keep my cakes at room temperature. If somebody says, Natalie, I'm a customer and I'm dying to add fresh strawberry in this cake somehow, what I would recommend is using cake and buttercream that's fine at room temperature, which is most, as long as you don't use fresh fruit. And I would give them a sauce on the side. So I'd be like, here's your elaborate room temperature sculpted cake. And then I would literally be like, okay, and you guys can like put the sauce on there as you want. Like I get one of those like squirt bottles and just let them do it for you. And then they can kind of gauge how much filling they want too, which is kind of fun. But I really, if a cake is super elaborate and I know I need to use modeling chocolate, I use like stable, like shelf, the things that are stable at room temperature, the things that don't have to be refrigerated. So chocolate's fine, cake is fine at room temperature, and then once they eat the cake, if they have leftovers, then they can refrigerate it. Let me get that chocolate out. Oh my goodness.
So here's a question that relates to refrigeration.
Real quick, see, look at that. So this was the chocolate that I put in there. How long was it in there? I don't know, like a couple minutes. And see how it's still bends, still got a little give, but it's way more firm. So if I wanted to cover a cake nice and pretty, I would lay this flat in the fridge and it's gonna hold its shape. So it's way different than it was just so soft. And now it's got that nice bendable but firm. Okay, what were you saying?
Well, so when you refrigerate a cake that's using modeling chocolate, there's an issue, right, with condensation. It'll beat up, it'll take the color away.
Yes, so if I finished a cake, it's all hand painted, I put it in the fridge. If you have a dehumidifier in your fridge, which probably most people don't, bakeries do sometimes, but typically you don't have that dehumidifier. And when you don't, that means when you take that out of the fridge, all the moisture in the air is just gonna go right to the cake and your color will bead up and it can potentially ruin the paint job. Called a paint job. It can potentially ruin it. So I really, if you can avoid it, it also makes the chocolate soft, which is like, it gets gooey. Now this didn't get gooey because this, actually it is starting to get a little bit. So you gotta work fast when you put it on. It's starting to already, because it's kind of warm in here, because there's humidity in the air. It will start to get like a little gooey. So what I would do is I'd cover the cake, let it sit, get back to room temperature until any of that moisture is off of there, and then I paint it. So complicated, right? It's really not that bad once you get used to using it. It's just different than fondant. Fondant, you want to keep this thing refrigerated at all times. Got any more questions?
I guess one more.
Trying to think if there's anything I forgot.
When you're sculpting the face, do you sculpt the face like the nose and stuff on a cake? But you add those as separate pieces.
Yeah, so when I'm sculpting a bust of someone, I just do like a basic like mannequin style shape for the actual cake. And then any details like lips or a nose, I just make those out of chocolate. And that's because it's just way easier and nobody is going to really care if just this this little nose is actually like, if there's cake inside of it. They just eat the nose, it's chocolate, and then they go in and cut slices out of the head. There's just not enough like of a thickness to a nose to really care about if that's chocolate, or excuse me, if that's cake or not. So I typically just make it out of chocolate. And nobody's ever like even questioned it. Like in terms of customers, they're always like just really happy with the cake itself. So that's not a big deal. Oh my. I talked a lot. It's been an hour. All right, so if you guys have any last questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to call it. This is a fun live stream for me. I love talking about modeling chocolates. I am always down to talk about modeling chocolate. I love it.
One last question is, can it be marbled?
You know, I haven't marbled modeling chocolate, but I am very sure that you can do it. Marbling being taking, you know, two colors and like folding the two colors in and then creating that kind of marbling effect by like rolling it out and folding it and rolling it out. I'm pretty confident that would work. I don't think that there'd be any issue. Hi, Phoebe. You just found our channel. When's the next class? So in Austin, Texas, we're doing Baby Yoda. And when was that again? August 9th. We changed the date, but August 9th. So that'll be our next class. And then I really want to set up more classes once everything's a little bit more figured out. Once things are really open and I know that I don't have to change any dates or anything, then I'll start scheduling classes again. And I'll be sure to put that on any social media or, and also like on the website. We have a mailing list on the website. So if you guys sign up for the mailing list, we always put the classes up on there. when we have a new class scheduled, we send out an email to everybody just to let them know. That's pretty much what we use it for. Sometimes we'll let you guys know if we have new shirts or merchandise, things like that. But we don't like overdo it with the mailing list. So if you guys want to go to sideserfcakes.com and sign up, you can know when the classes are. Maybe when I'm on some like TV stuff, but really, we don't put out too many emails. I don't want to spam anybody. Online classes. So we've been talking about that. You stay tuned. Nicole is in, oh no, who is in France? Dave?
Maine.
What was it?
Maine.
Maine?
Maine.
Maine? I don't know. I hope that's right. Is in France. And I definitely want to get some classes up online so that people can, sign up for those, because not everybody's in Austin, Texas, or even the US, which is where I typically hold the classes. Bye, Gary. Thanks for coming. Did I already cover painting layers of different colors? It's gonna be the same as far, this I only used green, but if I could show you real quick. This will make brown probably. Let me see here. So since these colors have started to, they're dry by now. If you don't add white to this, you can add like another layer of color. And in this, I'm going in a different direction. So this is just like a little bit of red. So you can see that there's definitely a different tone here rather than the red and the green. So if I wanted to muddy this green, I'm like, this is too vibrant. I could go in with red and muddy it. And you just gotta like really like practice, try things out. It's always gonna be a little different, but you can layer up the colors for sure. So you can see. So that's already starting to look more like the pepper color, like a real pepper. It's gonna be a little bit more of like a deep green rather than grass green. All right, guys, I think I covered everything as far as I can remember, or as far as I can think. I wanted to talk about painting and covering the cake for sure, because those are the most commonly asked questions. Different colored candy melts. As far as I know, different colored candy melts do not affect the ratio of modeling chocolate to corn syrup. So you're gonna keep the same recipe, only when you use a different color candy melt, obviously it's gonna be the color of the candy melt, so you'll have like purple, let's say. It won't mess with the ratio though, your recipe is gonna be the same. All right. Well, it was fun, guys. I'm glad that you guys were able to make it. And I'm glad that, well, like I said, we're going to keep this up. So if you guys want to come back and you're like, I remember kind of what she said about painting, you can come back and reference this. And of course, ask questions. And if you like this video, give us that thumbs up, because that helps for the video to reach more people. And that's always a good thing. All right, you guys have an awesome day. And I'll be doing another live next week, and we'll also have a new video out on Monday, as always. You should have a number available on speed dial. You know what? That would be awesome. I think I'd be pretty busy. Busier than I already am, right? All right. Bye, guys.